South Jersey's official play-by-play home of the Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers.
At 0 point would I ever consider not being a fan of the team.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City. A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is Game Night with Josh Hinnick.
Let's go!
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
And he scored!
Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Josh Hinnick.
Josh Hinnick here on 97.3 ESPN as we are hanging out with you as the Phillies lead 2-1 over the Washington Nationals thanks to two solo bombs. We are in the top of the eighth inning. Bryce Harper got the scoring started for the Phils with one home run, and then Kyle Schwarber hit the second homer. So Phillies, even though they had 12 strikeouts through the first 5 innings, they are now hitting around the Nationals bullpen as, trying to see who that was. He just got on base. I think it was Kepler. Yeah, Kepler just got a base hit. He's got a double. So Phillies trying to salvage a game in which, frankly, they were not looking so good to start the game. And it kind of goes to the question I asked Mike Gill and Nick Earnshaw earlier. So I'll get you guys that question in just a bit. Here's coming up on the show, your guys' text I want to get to, 609-403-0973. Your reactions to the Phillies opening day so far, plus Flyers fired John Tortorella. It happened this morning on my drive into work. We're going to talk with Scott Laughlin from Sirius XM NHL Radio, because Scott Laughlin, who hosts the Morning Skate, he was live on his show when the Tortorella news broke. So I'm looking forward to talking with him, get his reaction to what happened versus what he expects to happen next for the Flyers. Because Danny Briere made some interesting comments. I'll get to that in just a minute. But we're going to start with the Phillies, because the Phillies are a team that is going to generate a level of angst the entire year. And I asked the question to Mike Gill and Nick Earnshaw in the last hour of the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN, which is, if the Phillies turn into a team like the Boston Celtics, which shoots a ton of threes, just chucking threes all day long, they live or die by the three, but they won an NBA championship with that style of offense. If the Phillies are a team that, and I'm just throwing it out there, let's say they average 8 strikeouts a game, but they win a World Series, does anybody care? The answer is no, you will not care. Just like you don't care after the Eagles won a championship this year, that the Eagles had that embarrassing loss on Monday Night Football in Week 2. Just like you don't talk about anymore how Nick Sirianni got into it with fans after the Browns game. No one talks about your flaws if you win a championship. So realistically, how important are the flaws of a sports team if we are going to act like those flaws don't exist the moment they win a championship? I want someone to explain to me how somebody winning a championship is equal to a presidential pardon. Are we just supposed to act like teams are no longer flawed? But if they win a championship, all's perfect, all's fine. And I think that's kind of where my conundrum is. I don't mind fans reacting from game to game, inning to inning. I don't mind us having a conversation of why is Nick Castellanos swinging at a ball in the dirt and he still gets a base hit out of it. Like, I don't mind having these conversations. But there's a huge difference between having a conversation and us sitting here and acting like this is the reason why they won't win a championship. When we already know that winning a championship takes a multitude of good fortune, positive vibes, luck, blessings, whatever term you want to use. It's the guy that acts like if the Phillies strike out 13 times on opening day, they can't win a championship. I can't work with that. If you want to tell me if the Phillies are going to win a championship, they need to cut down the strikeouts, I can work with that. So I'm in a really strange place, and maybe you guys can help me. Now, I will be specifically critical, and that is 2 of those strikeouts were by Harper today before he hit that home run. And I don't think the Phillies striking out all those times is actually that much of a negative. Because, one, it's the first game of the year. When the Phillies won the World Series, they lost to the Nationals. Game 1 of the season. Now, the Phillies from game 1 to game 162 got much better in 2008. So, if the Phillies keep growing and evolving and getting better, by the way, Bryson Stott just struck out again. So, you got that going for him. For all the people who wanted Bryson Stott to be a leadoff hitter. I can play the game too. No, but let's get back to be serious here. It's the idea that I know who the Phillies are before today's game. They are a boom or bust offense. They are an offense that is not to play small ball. They have never been a team that plays small ball. They literally have 2 guys on the entire lineup who can even play small ball. The rest of the team is incapable of playing small ball. So I'm not surprised they're not playing well. In fact, I think what Mike Gill said earlier today, I got to give him a lot of credit because he has been an anti-Brandon Marsh guy for a while. Brandon Marsh is looking to more and more to be an absolute waste on this roster. You're literally keeping this guy for locker room vibes and for his potential. He's not here because he's the best player available. You can't tell me for 1 minute that if you had a choice between a better player, doesn't matter who it is, and Brandon Marsh, you won't go with the better player. The Phillies won't because the Phillies are hyper committed to this roster that they've built. So again, these are critiques we could have. Now, the positive from today is Zach Wheeler was a monster today. Zach Wheeler came out in this game and just said, I'm here to look like I'm the best pitcher in baseball. And there is an argument to be made that Zach Wheeler is starting to separate himself from some of his contemporaries at this point in his career. And like I said, today he looked absolutely dominant. And to me, it was more than just the 8 strikeouts. It was the fact that this guy threw almost 75% of his pitches, because he threw 97 pitches. 75% of his pitches were strikes. He was in control. He was accurate. The Phillies were just unlucky that Mackenzie Gore also had an even better day to start the season. And this is going to be the weakness for the Phillies the entire year. They are a lineup that can be taken advantage of by left-handed pitching. So guys like Mackenzie Gore, guys like Chris Sale, guys like Justin Steele, these are guys who are going to be able to potentially have success against them. And it's going to be on the shoulders of players such as Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, and Max Kepler to prove that this team can handle it. Because we already know, with the sample size of the last 2 seasons, Marsh and Stott are not good against left-handed pitching. They never have been, and frankly, it's starting to look like they never will be, as the Nationals are still losing in the game, but Ferrer, he is a left-handed pitcher, and he has been striking out left-handers, but giving up right-handers. Turner looks like he walked in this at bat. But the Phillies do lead 3-1 in the 8th inning. Yep, that's a walk for Trey Turner. So, what do you guys think? 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. A bunch of texts to get to here. Steve from Ventnor. Now, I will be fully transparent. I'm going to read Justin from Galloway's text first. Not because his text came in first, but because it's not broken up into 4 different texts. So, Steve, I'm going to get back to you, but when you break it up into 4 different texts, it's hard for me to read it sequentially, okay? So, Justin from Galloway gets first shot here on 97.3 ESPN, here on the Power Hour known as Game Night. Justin says, Josh, it's not all their flaws are forgotten, as they came out the best team on top in the end, even with their flaws. In other words, they're the best of the best with or without flaws. I feel like that's what it comes down to. And also, appreciate you in the Sports Bash, what you guys do every year. Go Phillies. That's Justin from Galloway. Well, Justin, I appreciate you chiming in. From what I understand, it was an amazing time everyone had over at Maynard's in Margate. Maynard's is always a great host in Margate. And Mike Gill, Nick Earnshaw, Jen Smith, everybody over there did a great job giving away the prizes today here with 97.3 ESPN. To your point about the flaws, Justin, you fit more into the category of someone that I could have a rational conversation with. This is why I don't respond to everybody on social media, because half of social media is just a cesspool of vomit, okay? Justin's making a very good point here. And the point is that it's not that people forget about their flaws. It's that they win in spite of them. And I think that is the key to a championship caliber team. A championship caliber team will overcome. A championship caliber team finds a way, right? Well, the idea of where there's a will, there's a way. It's the idea that the Philadelphia Phillies are a team that no one is perfect. But kind of like what I heard Jeff Passan say, yesterday on a podcast, ESPN MLB Insider, and I'm just quoting from him, so I got to give him credit. He basically came out and said, look, how many times has the best team in baseball not won a championship? He said, just because the Dodgers are the best team is no guarantee they win a championship. So there's no reason why the Phillies, if they just endure, if they just try to get better each day, and all the other cliches you can throw out there, it's the idea that the Phillies could progress into a better baseball team. And it's a very poignant text there from Justin and Galloway, not just because he complimented me and the Sports Bash and 97.3 ESPN. All right. Now, as I said, Stephen Ventnor, you sent me a plethora of texts. So I am going to attempt to read through these texts. Okay? He says, look at the lefties in our division. Gore, Sale, Quintana. Why didn't we get a right-handed bat? Well, you didn't get a right-handed bat because the Phillies organization thinks they know better than everybody else. Rob Thompson literally told the media today that he's starting Turner because there's a left-handed pitcher. So they know that the left-handed hitting is a problem for them. And they still acquire Max Kepler. So why they get a right-handed bat? Because in Dave Dombrowski's mind, he says, it doesn't matter. In Rob Thompson's mind, he says, we talk too much about it. The organization is telling you why they didn't require a right-handed bat. Because they are still convinced that they are a better team with a heavy left-handed lineup than without. By the way, here's something interesting for you guys. Jordan Romano, he is in the 8th inning. So a guy that people were wondering, was he going to come here and be the closer? He is in the 8th inning of this game. So now the question becomes, Is Alvarado coming in the ninth inning if they hold this lead? Stay tuned to find out. No, I'm just serious. But seriously, back to Steven Ventnor. The reason why they get right-handed bat is because the Phillies think they think they know everything. They got it all figured out. He goes on to say, as I watched Zach Eflin cruise to a W for a World Series contender, I remember we basically let him walk in favor of Taijuan Walker. Well, I think that's a hindsight 2020 and not telling the whole story, okay? First of all, Eflin, if I remember correctly, he's pitching for the Orioles, right? Let me just look it up real quick. Yeah, he's pitching for the Orioles. The Orioles are as much of a World Series contender as the Phillies are. From if you take the Orioles starting nine and line it next to the Phillies starting nine, they're not better than the Phillies. They're younger, but they're not better. So Eflin, he's pitching for a World Series contender. They're as much of a contender as the Phillies are, number one. Number two, it's not that they let him walk in favor of Taijuan Walker, okay? That's a little bit revisionist history. What happened is if you go back to what really happened, Eflin got injured in 2022. When he returned for the postseason, they had re-solidified the rotation, and there was really no spot for him in the rotation moving forward because the Phillies had settled into a rotation at the time that was built around Wheeler, Suarez, Nola as your big three. And then the Phillies believed that if Walker could be their 4, their 5, that they're a pretty good team because Walker had pitched well and had less of an injury history than Eflin did at the time. Now, things have changed since then because Eflin went to Tampa and has shown himself to be a much more reliable pitcher than Walker is. The Phillies gambled, and they came out wrong. That's number one. Number two, Eflin wanted a lot of money because they knew his injury history intimately. The Phillies said, we're not giving you what you want because we know that you have had trouble staying healthy. Now, again, was Eflin healthy in Tampa because he has grown and evolved and become a more reliable athlete, or because he was in Tampa? You could argue that Eflin is where he is now is because Tampa made him a better pitcher. Because it seems like almost everyone that goes to Tampa becomes a better pitcher. Steve Ventnor goes on to say, Dombrowski has been good, not perfect. He whiffed on Kyle Tucker. Well, some of that reporting on Kyle Tucker has been disputed, okay? And I think that we got to be careful about talking about trades that may or may not have happened. Like, for example, we have empirical evidence. We have clear reporting that for the Sixers, for example, they could have had Tyrese Halliburton a few years ago, but Daryl Morey wanted James Harden. We know that as a matter of fact. That has been confirmed by multiple people. The Kyle Tucker trade has been disputed. It has been disputed if the Phillies actually offered the package that's been reported for Kyle Tucker. There's been a dispute about what exactly could have been traded for Kyle Tucker, what the Phillies will or were not being willing to give up for a Kyle Tucker. And the funny part of all of this, Steven Ventnor, is Kyle Tucker is a left-hander. So on one hand, we are talking about they didn't have a right-handed batter, but Kyle Tucker's left-hander, so why would you want him anyway? I think this is where the conversation evolves, is the idea that it's not always cut and dry with this stuff, right? It's not always, if you would have done this, this would have happened. It doesn't always work like that because in baseball, we know over 162 games, guys get injured, guys go through slumps. Pitchers get injured, they go through slumps. Hitters, they have good days and bad days. So a lot of this is a very inexact science. But thank you, Steven Ventnor, for texting in. And thank you, Justin and Galloway. Call me on next here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig live in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios. Flyers fired John Tortorella Why? Danny Briere gave you his explanation earlier today. We'll ask Scott Laughlin if he's buying it. Scott Laughlin, Sirius XM NHL Radio, covering the NHL for 30 years, joins us next on 97.3 ESPN.
At Sturdy Savings Bank, they're making it easier for first-time homebuyers with up to $30,000 in grant assistance through the 2025 Homebuyer Dream Grant Program. Sturdy Savings Bank will provide professional guidance, mortgage options, and all the tools for your Homebuyer Dream Program grant of up to $30,000. Visit SturdyOnline.com. That's SturdyOnline.com. Subject to program eligibility and credit approval. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender. NMLS number 410428.
When you're hiring, have you ever felt like you're missing out on meeting truly great candidates for your roles? It seems impossible to find them, but they have to be out there somewhere, right? Well, they're not hard to find when you know where to go, and that place is ZipRecruiter. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter helps 10 million people with their job search every day. And because these people are actively looking for jobs just like yours, it's easy to find the right person right away. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. But if you're not using ZipRecruiter, you're missing out. So see what it's like when the impossible is easy. When you go to ZipRecruiter.com/radio right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. Once again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter.com/radio. Never miss out on great candidates with ZipRecruiter.
Bring spring to your door with Target Circle 360. Get all you need for Easter hosting, spring get-togethers, and more with unlimited same-day delivery through Target Circle 360. From Easter basket goodies to fresh florals, getting everything the same day is easy. Open the Target app and bring the magic of the season to your door with unlimited same-day delivery through Target Circle 360. Visit Target.com/circle or the Target app for more details. Subscription required. Same-day delivery is subject to terms. Applies to orders over $35.
This is the Town Square, New Jersey Info and Weather Network.
Progressive presents a sports flash on 97.3 ESPN. Philadelphia Flyers hosting the Montreal Canadiens today at the Wells Fargo Center. The team has made a change at the top. John Tortorella fired today with 9 games remaining in year 3 of his tenure. The Flyers have dropped 11 of 12, outscored 52-21 during that stretch, including a 7-2 loss in Tortorella's final game on Tuesday at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto against the Maple Leafs. Tortorella had a 14-point improvement in year 1, a 12-point improvement in year 2, but year 3 has been a disappointment as the Flyers are headed to missing out on the playoffs for the 5th consecutive year. Associate coach Brad Shaw behind the bench tonight with the Flyers host the Montreal Canadiens at Wells Fargo Center. Cash back for every bet with a G-Bank Signature Visa card. VSIN.com/GBank. Mike Sennett, 97.3 ESPN.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, let's talk ED because millions of men experience it. But not everyone can access or afford treatments like Viagra. Hims can help. Through Hims.com, you can access a full range of treatment options for ED through a 100% online process. To start your free online visit and save up to 95%, go to Hims.com/joy. HIMS.com/JOY.
From the Town Square, New Jersey Info and Weather Network, I'm Chief Meteorologist Dan Zarrow. Our next rain chance is about 24 hours away. Showers roll in late tomorrow, potentially with some rumbles of thunder. For tonight, though, quiet and cool. A few clouds may creep in by daybreak. Look for a low of 42 degrees. Increasing clouds tomorrow, warming up to around 60. Rain showers possible late day. And then Saturday, warm and windy, mostly cloudy, high 78. 68 with clouds and showers Sunday. Get weather 24/7 wherever you are. Download our free mobile app today.
97.3 ESPN has teamed up with Seize the Deal for incredible weekly offers from some fantastic local restaurants. Here's this week's big deal.
Get a $50 gift card good for use at the Cheese Board, Central Square in Linwood for just $25.
Get this great deal starting Friday at 9 a.m. at SeizeTheDeal.com. Hurry, chances are this deal will sell quickly. For more info on this great deal, go to SeizeTheDeal.com.
SeizeTheDeal.com. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
When you're in this type of situation and you're losing all the time and there's nothing at the end of the tunnel for you, there's certainly going to be some frustration. But this falls on me. I'm not really interested in learning how to coach this type of season where we're at right now, but I have to do a better job. So this falls on me, getting the team prepared to play the proper way until we get to the end.
Well, that was the end for John Tortorella, basically 50 hours ago, because he was let go, fired, terminated, whatever you want to call it this morning. And while Danny Briere, he said, listen, I didn't fire him because of those comments, but he said it was a culmination of things leading up to this point, and we're going to do it right now. Scott Laughlin, of course, covers the NHL, Sirius XM NHL Radio. Of course, the morning skate 7 to 11 a.m. each day. Scott, welcome in. I know for you it's been an interesting day because this news broke on your show, and it's been an evolving conversation throughout the day. How's it going?
Yeah, we're doing well, Josh. We're doing well, and, as you heard, we had the fridge Todd Fedoruk standing by to join us, and I get whispered in my ear by my producer that John Tortorella's been let go. All of a sudden, you start to try to put the pieces together, and you start to think immediately, was this all about what happened Tuesday after the loss in Toronto and the comments that you just aired there? That's what he had to say, and there were many different ways to decipher what he said, but when you read between the lines, I guess Danny Briere and Keith Jones and ownership didn't like what they heard.
Scott, you've seen a lot of different teams in the NHL, and obviously it's kind of like almost like a joke about the NHL. They fire coaches a lot, but isn't there something to be said in all this about the fact that you mentioned Danny Briere? Him and Keith Jones did not hire John Tortorella, so how much of that is involved in this?
I think there's a little bit of that involved here. I think that, ultimately those that are in the Flyers organization probably had a heck of a lot of respect for John and his coaching record, the fact that he's won like 700-plus games, the fact that he's in the conversation for the Hockey Hall of Fame. Not sure if he's going to land somewhere else. People have already speculated, hey, Boston is looking for somebody. Maybe Boston in a retool-type situation for next season could be offering for John as well. So, I think there is something to that because ultimately, the way sports works, Josh. I mean, the fact is you come in, and if you inherit somebody, sure, you can stay with that guy, but at some point you're probably going to get an opportunity to let him go, and you're going to hire your own guy back. And then if things don't work out, then the fingers start collectively getting pointed at the general manager himself. But look, I think that this, as Danny had suggested, was a series of events. It's no coincidence, though, that what happened in Toronto a couple of nights ago was the final straw as far as they were concerned. And I got to say, Josh, I mean, I said it this morning, I'll reiterate once again that I totally misread his comments. Like when he came out and said, this falls on me, I've got to do a better job, I thought, hey, that's great. You're taking responsibility and you're holding yourself accountable for things getting away from you and from your hockey club. And second to that, I thought that John was actually throwing his hat in the ring to make sure that Briere and Jones and ownership knew that he's still got a year left on his contract and he wanted to see this thing through into next season. I felt like he was saying, I'm not ready to learn how to coach a team in this situation, by basically saying I haven't been in this situation too much over the past 20-plus years of my coaching career. Take a look at my resume. I deserve to come back next season. As it turns out, as I say, I totally misread the situation because they looked at it a different way. They looked at it probably as the final straw in John Tortorella saying, I've taken this team pretty much as far as I can, and they came to the mutual agreement, I'm guessing, that it was time for him to step aside and go.
It was interesting. Start with Scott Laughlin from Sirius XM NHL Radio joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. It felt like the Flyers were using Tortorella, and I don't mean using it in a negative way. I mean using him as like a tool, as almost like a litmus test of like the development of these young players, because we saw what he did in Columbus, right? We saw what he's done in places like New York with guys like Callahan, right? This idea that Tortorella, if you can't develop under Tortorella, what did they do? They traded Farabee and Frost away because they said, listen, a guy like Bobby Brink and Tyson Forrester, they're developing. Frost and Farabee hit his ceiling. So to me, what's interesting is that they didn't let Tortorella see it through to the end of the season after they already were using him as a litmus test with the development of these players.
Yeah, I think you go back a couple of years ago too, Josh, and like we wondered whether or not John Tortorella would be the right fit for this group, just because they were in a full-blown rebuild. And you wondered, right? I mean, even for veteran players, like you think about a guy like Cam Atkinson, who of course has had John at a couple of different stops along the way. Even for veteran guys, sometimes they don't respond to Tortorella after a while. And then you're thinking, okay, we've got 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids in the organization we're trying to develop here as we try to build this thing back up from the ground up. And you're wondering how they're going to respond. And things, for the most part, did not go well. Now, to be fair, Josh, and you and I have talked about it, like, you know, we talked jokingly about the science experiment that John Tortorella had going on with a guy like Owen Tippett. Owen Tippett was a former first-round pick for the Florida Panthers, came out of junior hockey in the OHL as a 40-plus goal scorer. He was expected to score. Didn't do it with Florida, kind of got caught in the numbers game. When he got to Philadelphia, it was like John Tortorella saw something in Owen Tippett that he wanted to bring out. And he was playing him a lot, and he was giving him some responsibility going back a couple of seasons ago. And wouldn't you know it, John Tortorella turned Owen Tippett into a very good top-six hockey player. So, look, he's had his successes along the way, but I think he's also had more misses than successes, and I think it maybe caught up to him in this type of situation. And now I guess when you go to your next situation, if and when he gets that opportunity here as a veteran coach in this league, who's got to be wondering, will I get that opportunity? Do I want to do it any longer? Like I said, whether it's a team like Boston or somewhere else, it's going to have to be in a definite and clear-cut retool. A rebuild certainly not going to work for John Tortorella at this stage.
You know, you mentioned what's next, so let me ask you, what do you think is next for a team like the Flyers? Because, you know, I had a conversation recently with Bob Wischusen, who wrote that book with Keith Jones years ago. And, you know, he made the comment to me about, you know, if Keith Jones is still the Keith Jones that he's known Bob's whole life, Bob told me here on 97.3 ESPN that he looks at Keith Jones as a guy who he's not going to sit around on his hands and have like a 5-6 year rebuild, that the Flyers are going to want to turn this around sooner than later. So what do you think the next coach needs to be for the Philadelphia Flyers?
Well, I think it's going to have to be somebody that can grow with the group and somebody that you're going to commit to over the long haul. And I think you look at San Jose this season, right? Now, granted, San Jose became the first team to get eliminated from Stanley Cup playoff contention, and that happened a couple of weeks ago. And San Jose's got a darn good shot at garnering the top pick in the draft coming up in Los Angeles on June 27th. So we have to say that. That being said, a guy like Ryan Warsofsky, good young coach, graduated from the American Hockey League, where he had a great deal of success with the Chicago Wolves. He's grown into San Jose. They've got the young kids who are going to come up through the ranks and grow with him. And I think even given what the standings tell us about the Sharks, they would consider this season, believe it or not, to be a success because the young players have progressed. They're going to be aggressive in the open market coming up in July, and I think that they can start to retool that thing and build that thing back up to a certain extent. Chicago's still certainly spinning its wheels, and maybe Chicago's the other example as to how a rebuild doesn't necessarily work. So what I'm getting at, Josh, is I've thought about a couple of different names here. And number one, Ian LePerriere, of course, is a fan favorite in Philadelphia.
Yep.
I think that, from the outside looking in, you guys might have a better read on it. I think that he's done a fairly solid job down at Lehigh Valley, so I think that Ian is going to be in consideration for the job. Brad Shaw's a well-respected guy who's been a head coach before. You kind of wonder, though, he's, John Tortorella's X's and O's type guy. Are they going to want to continue on with sort of that Tortorella-esque type guy? Now, Brad obviously is not the disciplinarian that a John Tortorella is, but he is a guy that maybe is going to be seen as being aligned with John Tortorella, so maybe you want a fresh start. Another guy I thought of to that extent with Ryan Warsofsky, good young up-and-coming coach, is David Carl, because David Carl's won a couple of NCAA championships at Denver. He's won back-to-back World Junior Hockey Championships for USA Hockey. There's a guy that told us on our program last year, Josh, that for him to leave Denver, it's going to take a pretty sweet offer. But I took that to mean like somebody call him, make him an offer he can't refuse, and I think David Carl would jump right from college into the NHL. I know Dave Hackstall did it, and it didn't necessarily have the results that Flyers fans were looking for. So do you want to go down that road? I'm not sure. And then the name I threw out today, Josh, Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet is in the final stages of his contract with the Vancouver Canucks. there already is some speculation that with all that's been going on in the front office out in Vancouver, they've had such a soap opera-ish type season out there with things going on the ice, off the ice, conflicts in the dressing room, trying to make the playoffs all the while. You wonder if Rick Tocchet's going to become available in a couple of weeks' time. So I wouldn't expect Danny Briere and Keith Jones to rush to judgment on hiring the next guy, and whether it's a younger guy like a David Carl from Denver, or if Rick Tocchet suddenly becomes available, I think Rick has done one heck of a job out in Vancouver, given all the circumstances, at least having the Canucks knocking on that door for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. I think he should warrant strong consideration if he becomes available in the next couple of weeks.
And it'll also be interesting because for the Flyers, they had that history of only hiring Flyers guys, then they got away from it. And now the question is, do they get back to it with a guy, like you mentioned, like a Tocchet, like a LaPerriere? A couple more for Scott Laughlin. Catch him Monday through Friday mornings on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, 7 and 11 a.m. for the morning skate. One of the points that we have been talking about is no matter who you hire, Scott, right? No matter who you bring in the next head coach, you got to get some better talent on here. And one of the problems of the Flyers is, Scott, their defense stinks. They are horrible at skating on defense, getting back on rotations. The inconsistency of this defensive core has been a problem. And it's almost to the point where you wonder, maybe Sam Ersson isn't the goalie of the future, but whoever the goalie of the future is, you need to get some better people in front of him. So for the Flyers, how much of this offseason is about the coach and how much of it is let's bolster this roster so we're better no matter what?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think it's really difficult to get a real good gauge on what Sam Ersson's going to turn out to be, right? Like, we've talked about it, Josh. I mean, going back to last season, I think given how much he played a lot more than he should have played, ideally. He did fairly well. This season being banged up, and they've had the other two Russian goaltenders, of course, that have come through there as well, still trying to figure things out in the best league in the world. So they've got three viable options, but at this point, because of what you've said, they're not a great defensive team, and they don't have a strong blue line in front of them. I think it's been difficult to get a read on these guys when it's all said and done. So that's the first area that they have to shore up, is they have to find somebody on the open market. I mean, best case scenario, the Flyers somehow, some way win the draft lottery, and Matthew Schaefer in the top pick would fall into their laps. But assuming that doesn't happen, because the odds are definitely stacked against anything like that from a Philadelphia perspective, the ideal thing is to go out there and shake the tree in July, see if you can upgrade just a little bit and make it a stronger blue line in front of him. And you wonder about a guy like Cam York, too, right? I mean, you guys have seen him a lot, and he came out of NCAA play at Michigan, right? And there was all this fanfare about what kind of player he was going to turn out to be. And he, too, of course, has been in and out of Shea Doghouse Tortorella over the last number of years, too. So you just wonder if a guy like that gets a new lease on life in this league now that he's not being coached by John Tortorella. It'll be interesting to see under Bradshaw down the stretch here in the final 9 games starting tonight as to whether or not some of these kids start to maybe loosen up, play with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more freedom, knowing that if they do make a mistake, they'll get put back out on the ice inevitably by Bradshaw. At this stage, that's what Brad's got to do with these kids, is let them play down the stretch here, figure things out a little bit, and to provide Danny Briere with a little bit more as to what he really has going into 25-26.
Scott, you led me right to my final question I want to touch on with you, which is about the draft, because the Flyers have 3 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. They got potentially 2 coming in 2027, depending on if the conditions pan out. But still, they got 11 picks in the upcoming draft this year, 6 next year, 8 in 2027. And Danny Briere has come out and said, Scott, not literally, but kind of like inferred, hey, we don't plan on using all those picks. So what is a legitimate expectation for a team to maybe even start moving picks for the draft?
Yeah, I mean, for any teams, Josh, that have as many as 3 picks, then I would say there's got to be at least one first-rounder that's on the table, right? And one first-rounder could fetch you back a top-4 caliber defenseman on or before draft day on June 27th and then into the 28th, of course, to complete the draft in Los Angeles. So if you've got the extra picks, why not use one of them or so? And, we talked about this before Arizona moved to Utah. And we said, you know what, if there's anything Bill Armstrong, the general manager of Arizona, now of the hockey club in Utah, has done over the last couple of years, when he took over from John Chayka out there in Arizona, the Coyotes' draft cupboards were empty. They had hardly any draft picks to look forward to, and when you're in the midst of taking on a rebuild, the last thing you want to do, Josh, as we know, is open up the cupboard and see that you don't have any draft picks, because that makes the rebuild even more exhausting. So I think the fact that, Philadelphia, like Montreal has done in the past couple of years, and now they're starting to see the fruits of their labor as well, the fact that they've got all these picks really bodes well. But you're right. I mean, you've got all these draft picks, but there's only a certain number of guys that can play for your team in the NHL. And you can't all of a sudden say we've got 20 some odd draft picks in the next two drafts, and 15 of these guys will make the NHL. That's not the way it works. First of all, some of them won't hit, and again, just because of a numbers situation, you can only have so many guys playing in the league in the first place. So I think what you do is you draft and you nurture and cultivate and develop these young players. But with the extra draft picks you've got to be very, very smart and cognizant of what you need, using some of those picks in a package to go out and upgrade your situation with some players. I look at a guy like Morgan Riley in Toronto, for example. I mean, that would be a great fit with the Philadelphia Flyers. He's had a very down season for the Maple Leafs. The Leaf fan base is kind of down on him, but he's had a very solid NHL career where he's been a number one, number two defenseman with the Leafs. There's a guy, if you package some picks to Toronto, and, God forbid, the Leafs end up bowing out early on in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which has generally been the case for the past 20-plus years anyway, maybe you could go out and you could seize on the opportunity of bringing a Morgan Riley in off a trade with Toronto. I don't know, just food for thought, something like that. Use the picks to bring in a player like that could give you the instant upgrade going into the next season in October.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, if Toronto bows out in the first round, you might be calling Toronto asking for a defenseman. You might get Berube along with them. I mean, the way things have gone up there, I mean, I'm just saying. I know Berube's got a pretty good relationship with Keith Jones, so I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I mean, the poor Toronto fans. I mean, their Maple Leaf fans got to be like in the top 5 most tortured fan bases in sports at this point.
Yeah, I would have to put the Leafs right up there. The Buffalo Sabres now going on 14 straight seasons, Josh, as crazy as that sounds. They're going on 14 straight seasons and missing the playoffs, so I feel bad for that team 2 hours away from Toronto as well. So, yeah, in Southern Ontario and just across the border, there's a whole lot of hurt going on as far as the NHL teams are concerned.
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine who lives outside Toronto. He says they care more about the lacrosse team right now sometimes than the hockey team. And I'm like, that's kind of sacrilegious, man. He's like, hey, it is what it is. But
yeah, absolutely. We'll see what they can do. I mean, as you know, Craig was brought into Toronto, and he's still riding high off the Cup win with St. Louis in 2019, and he was brought into Toronto for one thing, and that is to start to win Game 83 onwards, not just win one round of the playoffs, win a couple of rounds. If the Leafs can somehow get to the conference final series, I think everybody in these parts would be overjoyed.
He's Scott Laughlin. Check him out on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio Monday through Friday for the morning skate, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Give him a follow on the Twitter X platform at LaughlinSXM. And he joined us right here on 97.3 ESPN. Scott, always appreciate the insights. I'm sure we'll be talking in the offseason.
All right, we look forward to it as always. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Josh Hennick here in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. Check back on the text board. Coming up next, 609-403-0973.
With GMF financing to qualified buyers excludes Traverse and Corvette excludes prior sales.
It's back! It's Bennett Chevy's most popular event, March Markdowns, for the entire month of March. So get to Bennett right now for savings up to 20%. That's right, you get up to 20% off. That's because Bennett sells new Chevys at the true GM supplier employee price, plus gives you all the rebates. So get to Bennett Chevy now and save even more with available 0% financing. Looking for used? Bennett Chevy is South Jersey's largest certified dealer with great savings on every single one. And during March Markdowns, you'll get a minimum $10,000 for the worst clunker towards any pre-owned in stock. That's at least $10,000. Imagine how much you'll get for a good trade. And our non-commissioned sales team is the best. They're paid on your satisfaction, not your budget and how much you spend. So everybody gets our famous no pressure, friendly, and helpful service. Together, let's drive during March Markdowns at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
At Skechers, we put the S in comfort. Now, I know you're probably spelling comfort in your head and asking yourself, is that possible? Am I just a really bad speller? Look, I don't know your spelling aptitude, but Skechers most definitely put the S in comfort because Skechers is the comfort technology company and has developed fits and features that change everything you know about comfort, like hands-free Skechers slip-ins, the ultimate in comfort and convenience. It's footwear you just step into and they're on, with no bending down. Find Skechers at a Skechers store, Skechers.com, or wherever stylish footwear is sold.
With Progressive, renters can save on protection for the things that make your place yours, even things that don't make sense to everyone.
People always wonder why I don't get rid of my guitar since I never play. But it's like, what if I actually end up taking lessons? Sure, I've had it for 8 years, but if I get rid of it, then what will my New Year's resolution be next January?
Exactly. So bundle your renters and auto and save with Progressive and protect the things that make sense to you. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates and other insurers not available in all states or situations. Covered subject to policy terms and conditions.
Something good to know from First Bank of Sea Isle City. We have all of today's innovative banking products just like the big banks, but we offer something they can't. A personal community focus. Let's get you started with Bill Pay. You save time when you pay your bills online. It's fast, easy, and convenient. First Bank of Sea Isle City. A community bank that delivers more for you every day. Personal service, today's technology, from the people who truly care. Learn more at firstbankseaisle.com.
Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennick on 97.3 ESPN and on the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
By the way, the Phillies are tied 3-3 going to extra innings. Jose Alvarado came in, shut him down. Jason Romano, well, he did not look so good. And it kind of goes back to the whole question when it comes to bullpen pitchers. It's like playing roulette, right? It's the idea that you don't always know what you're getting. So, Phillies going to extra innings, opening day of the year. We'll keep you updated until the show is done. Coming up tonight on 97.3 ESPN, we have the Sweet 16. Yes, the next round of March Madness. You hear all the action right here on your home for the NCAA tournament, 97.3 ESPN, and streaming live on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, which is free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle. Before we get back to the Phillies conversation we were having before the break, I did want to hit on this when it comes to the conversation we had with Scott Laughlin. And it kind of harkens back because I heard something Scott say there during our conversation that is similar to something that we have heard from our Flyers insider, Kevin Durst, who covers the Flyers for us over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And that is, when you look at this organization, there is a talent vacuum. And if you're the Philadelphia Flyers, you cannot sit here and keep trying to grow this product, build this fan base's interest, right? And do so by overlooking the fact that you have a player right here, right now. A player in Matvei Mishkov. You don't want to do to him what is happening in Chicago. And this is the example everyone is going to keep using. And by the way, Buffalo as well with Jack Eichel. But Chicago is the most recent example. Connor Bedard, number 1 overall pick. Everyone agrees he was the best player in that draft far and away. Phenomenal, elite player, talent, etc. But he was a guy who went to a bad team. And it's like in football, to make the analogy for those of you who are not as diehard hockey people, it's like when David Carr went to the Houston Texans, or when a quarterback like Sam Darnold goes to the New York Jets, right? Or any of these top quarterbacks in football, they get drafted high. Well, the team that has a high draft pick is usually a bad football team. It's a team that had a bad year. And so it might take a year or two for them to start turning it around. Look at Baker Mayfield. It took him, 2 years before he actually won a playoff game? Even get to the playoffs in that case. In hockey, it's not that different. I think that hockey has two parallels. The draft is like the baseball draft, and the team building is like the NFL. It doesn't matter how great your individual player is. It's not like basketball. LeBron James in his prime could have gone to any team in the NBA and made that team better. Same with Michael Jordan. Same with Hakeem Olajuwon. The same with fill-in-the-blank great legendary player in NBA history. Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant. You put those guys on any team, you make them contenders. And then you build around that elite player. Hockey's a little different because hockey, you don't always need there to be an elite roster. You just need it to be a roster that's built together well. Most people outside of Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar can't name most of the Colorado Avalanche team that won a championship. For the Panthers last year, most people don't even know who was even on the team outside of Bobrovsky because he was a Flyers goalie in this area. And for the rest of the roster, I mean, let's be realistic. You know who, and I just forgot his name. That's how bad it is. Kachuk, yeah. You know who Kachuk is because of his dad and the pedigree that he came from. But most of these hockey teams are not built with superstars. Like, this isn't the Oilers of the 1980s or the Detroit Red Wings in the late 90s. You know, those teams are far few between. The elite roster teams don't happen as much because the talent pool is spread out so much because of expansion in the NHL. Because you have the Seattle Kraken and the Las Vegas Golden Knights and these other teams that have expanded over the years. You've created a dynamic where there's fewer great teams. So now it's about building a fundamental team around a star or two, right? And for the Flyers, you already have one superstar. Now you got to expand beyond that. How do you do that? Well, you do it by taking your team and putting them in the best position to be successful. And to me, it starts with the defense. I'm very conflicted on this, but to me, you either need to spend big money on the goaltender or you need to spend big money on the defense in front of the goaltender. And, you know, we mentioned those draft picks. You know, is it a situation where you take those picks and you go get a defenseman and then sign a veteran? Like, you know, do you try to, and I don't know what his contract is, I gotta look it up, but like a guy like Jonathan Quick, right? A guy who has won a championship. Can you get another year out of a guy like him? I'm looking up right now. I think he's a free agent. Yeah. So a guy like, no, Quick is under contract for 1 more year. Okay, so here's the deal. So he is extension eligible for 1 more year, then he'd be a free agent. But it's only a $1.5 million cap hit. He's 40 years old, though. Do you hyper-invest in the defenseman, trade for a guy like Quick, and have him and Sam Ersson parlay the next season back and forth? Like, that's what you might have to do if you're the Flyers. By the way, still a 3-3 tie game. Phillies got 2 men on, 2 outs. What's going to? Oh, they got a base hit into the alley there. 1 run scores, and the Phillies lead 4-3. 5-3, Phillies lead. They might win the opening day game. How about them apples? NCAA tournament next year on 97.3 ESPN.
Hey, it's Mike Gill. Have you checked out the most loved Indian restaurant in South Jersey? The Nizam's Indian Restaurant on Route 40 in Egg Harbor Township is amazing and ready to serve you delicious Indian dishes. NJ.com ranked them the #2 best restaurant in all of New Jersey. At Nizam's, they believe that dining is more than just great food. It's the whole experience. The Nizam's open 7 days a week from 11:30 a.m. to 9:30. Join them for a special lunch buffet on Sundays from 11:30 to 3. Visit thenizams.com for more information.